This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For August 13th, 2021, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure. We are back on Fridays, and it is Friday afternoon.
All day
It's
today.
been a while since we've
Friday.
done a show. It's been a couple of weeks. We're just going to kind of plug through this one. Please excuse any awkwardness or general non-familiarity we have with each other. I don't know who these people are, but there's a bunch of people on this call here, so we'll just run with it. My name's Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Mark, Larry, Jamie, and Rachel. And today's topic is going to be we're going to discuss our love-hate relationship with digital signage, as well as some generally unheralded academic potential for digital signage displays. But first, we have some AV
hate
news.
because like you love to hate it. Is that what I'm
Well,
getting that
actually,
vibe?
so it's a good point. When we were discussing several weeks ago topics for this show and trying to figure out what would make sense to discuss and what sort of things we want to come up with for August, somehow digital signage came up in the discussion, and we all kind of universally kind of lashed out at our frustrations and how much we, the trials and tribulations we've had with it, and we decided after about 3 minutes of that, nuts. This is a show. We've got enough material here. There's easily enough to discuss. So we're going to make digital signage a show. So, like I said, we're going to split it into two parts. We're going to talk about our love-hate relationship. That is to say, all the issues we've had with digital signage, successes and failures, but, how it works and that sort of thing. But then also this idea of how could it actually work better, I think. So we'll get to that in a minute. At first, though, we're going to do some AV news. And this one is from Tech Hive, from IDG's Tech Hive. And this is it's an article dated July 29th, so about 2 weeks ago. But this one caught my eye because the title is Amazon's second-gen Fire TV Cube now lets you make Zoom calls. And this is notable because we talked about this over a year ago, and it's honestly, there's all these streaming boxes out there. There's all these home smart TV boxes, all these things out there that you just plug it into your giant TV on the wall, and you watch your Netflix and your Hulu and your Disney. Well, that's got all the horsepower we need. All we need to do is add a camera and mic, and we've got a monster work from home or learn from home Zoom system. Why does this not exist? And yes, there have been some from the Facebook portal does it, and one of the Google Nest things that they keep renaming does it. But those are all kind of self-contained little devices. They're designed to use the camera and mic and the little screen on that device, and that's the same as just using your phone or a tablet, honestly. There's no real difference there. This one, I think, is notable because it's Amazon saying, here's this box you have. Use one of these 4 or 5 approved webcams for which we have drivers, which we added in an update, which is interesting because that means the capability's there and has been, so cool. You can use the little microphone on it. It's not going to be great, but it's serviceable. And if it's you or the kids sitting in the living room and you've got a 55 or 65-inch TV, why the heck not? So I guess my question is, why the heck did this take so long? I mean, we should have seen this last year from everybody. And it's like, now there's one, and it's like begrudging. It's like, it took like an extra year for them to do it. So what the heck? What do you guys think?
We talk about it as like an industry. Like, when is like the video world of like communications going to come to a home and be an actual market? And I think it is. And this is telling that you're kind of tiptoeing into that. But I'm surprised that there's not full-fledged integration firms like saying, this is what we do it well, and we will come turn your spare whatever room into the telepresence space that you want it to be for all your work from home, teach from home, learn from home.
Oh, that's absolutely
home.
happening. It's happening in the CEDIA space, though.
Yeah.
CEDIA worked to get residential integrators declared as an essential service per the national government last year, so that they could do exactly that, so that they could go into the homes of CEOs and executives and outfit them with fully featured telepresence space in their residence so that they could continue business operations during the pandemic.
And I've done some like higher end kind of work for some other broadcast networks, and we've done that same philosophy for like game day sporting events. We've built like micro studios above garages and in basements and the like, but not to this like simplicity. Like, here, take this little.
Sure, it's not been plug and play. It's been full integration.
I think what's interesting,
the integration
to me,
versus a commodity.
Right.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me here is that, like, I've been a little out of it lately with back to school work, right? Lately. And
Oh, no.
I didn't see this announcement. So this is the first I've heard of it from you, Chris. And I own one of these damn things. Not one, but you know what I see?
Go do it now live on the
yeah,
show.
let's do it live.
No, because I don't like to connect.
Just go upstairs and keep shouting
I
back
don't
down
like
to the microphone.
actually integrate some of that crap into my home. But the thing is
Well, there is that. That's a
like,
valid
I didn't
point.
see anything from Amazon on this, but I am seeing more and more and more on the Amazon Chime thing, which is their take at this.
That's their
And
instant
so-
messaging
but
platform,
they're-
yeah.
It seems as though they're trying to steal some of this thunder. And I wonder if some of these companies, Apple, Amazon, Google, since they all have their own product that does the same thing, if they're kind of like, screw that, we're not allowing these other ones to do it until we can get it done. Now, why they haven't done it, I don't know. But that's why...
Well, and that's the
I
larger
thought it was
question.
interesting.
You've got Amazon, or not Amazon, you've got Apple and Roku and all these guys who make little boxes. And yes, more and more things are integrated into the TV, but there's enough little boxes out there that have USB ports on it, which were initially designed for like reading media files and things. But why the heck? I mean, so yeah, you're right. This is the standalone option. I've already got one in my house. I can go plug this in and look at that. Now I can, do my classes on or have the kids do their classes on a 65 inch
I tend
TV.
to think the
Why heck
barrier
not?
is ergonomic. Because if you're doing it for work, you don't want
that's where I
to. You
was
don't want to be
thinking,
doing
too.
that work on a couch. And if you're doing it,
I have been in
people are
meetings where I've been on
working
yeah,
from
couches
home.
I
and
have done it
beds.
too. It
So
sucks.
this-
It's not
Yeah.
the experience that you want to like set up and have be permanent going forward.
People just
But-
they frown on me because I don't have a shirt on. My hands halfway down. Like
What do
Yeah.
they want from me?
But this is really
and the
like
beer usually
this
gets
is
me
like
in trouble.
talking to the grandparents.
and that's the other
Like-
thing is
like
that
you
when
wanna-
it
you wanna
comes
be in
down
contact
to
with
like
the
family
right?
conversations, I mean, I may be biased in this respect because my kids are very small. But mobility is so important. Like a video conferencing solution with a fixed camera viewing area would never work because no one would ever be in it. I know this from having set those up for, socially distanced Christmas mornings of years yore. It's if it's not on something like a tablet that you can carry around and chase the children with, it's not useful to me.
I think there's also
So I took a camera and put it on a clamp in my kitchen, and it's like on a rotating arm. So we did that same thing, and I give you the whole.
Oh, sure,
360
which
of
is
the
part of
downstairs
the
area. It worked
current
pretty well.
Echo Show solution, right? It's got that mobile arm with the
Yeah.
microphone that listens for where the people are and
You mean
follows
the
you
iMac?
around
Somebody's just
creepily.
screaming
yeah.
owl.
you mean
at
the
us right now,
iMac
too.
Mini.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, there you go.
It looks real. It's like this is like 20 years too late. I think some of the hesitancy too is there's still a lot of folks that don't trust those kind of devices anyway. Like some Big Brother spying on me, which is a little weird because they carry around their
Well,
phone.
and Jamie, to
but
that
if this
point, like,
thing's like sitting on top of your TV all the time, is somebody watching me watch TV?
Would you like it if it was built into
Well, they
your
already
microwave?
are watching you watch TV.
Amazon,
If you have a
Amazon
Samsung.
does that, by the way.
Yeah,
no,
the
Amazon-
Samsung refrigerator.
Amazon has an Alexa-enabled microwave.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not kidding.
silly.
It's goofy. But so, Jamie, to your point about not trusting people, that's exactly like when Facebook announced that they make I can't remember what it's called, but it's a version of their portal thing that's only
Right.
a camera and mic array to use your existing television, but for Facebook calls, which I have no interest in. But then they said, now we're going to add Zoom. I was like, oh, that's cool. But step one is sign up for a Facebook account. I'm like, no, I closed my Facebook account years ago because of all that crap. So I'm not going to go sign up for Facebook to use your little camera, as much as I like that form factor of here's smart camera and mic array that then uses your existing display. And Rachel, your point is valid that depending on the use case of this, it may not work for everybody. What makes sense to me is maybe not the living room. I think that's where they kind of pitch this, as you put your Amazon box in your living room TV and there you go. But you don't want to work from there. But a lot of people have been, as they're setting up increasingly sophisticated work from home environments, they may have another monitor or a 40-inch TV or something they picked up for $150, that would make, like, if I'm going to do dedicated calls all day long, why the heck not put it over there on a dedicated box, not affecting my little laptop?
Yeah.
Because trying to drive everything from a 14
And you
It'd
know
be
what?
really
I'm going to
cool.
call myself a liar from what I said earlier because now that I've had a little minute more to think about it, this is actually a perfect application for some of those auto tracking and auto framing cameras we've talked about before.
Well, and that's
That's what I was thinking when you were saying I hate those. I was like, don't know if
I'm
you do.
thinking the
I think
perfect
you do.
application for a box similar to this one is that it also runs a digital signage app. So, you'd be able just to click a button, it'd flip over to your video call, and then go back to your family calendar, and you're off and running. Digital signage.
Just in the home.
I think regardless, it's an intriguing announcement. There's a lot of potential. Be curious to see if the other players get involved and how people use these. Again, I'm just surprised it took like that extra year for this to happen, because it would have been, from a development standpoint, it would be so easy to like light up that mostly based on Android. Light up that Android APK. Here's Zoom. Do a little tweak. Here's some better drivers for it. Work with Zoom on it. Boom. Learn from home like last March, but whatever. So that's that for that. We'll move on to digital signage in a moment. Mark, push that button.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
So today's topic is digital signage and all that means. So I want to kind of split this conversation into two parts. One is the digital signage and kind of, like I said, our trials and tribulations and our love-hate relationship and how we use it and all that stuff. And then we're going to talk about some potential and how it could be used specifically in academic and training spaces. But so for this first part, I think probably the first thing we need to do is to define digital signage. And I think a lot of us think, well, it's a monitor with dedicated content being displayed in semi-public areas, right? I mean, it's managed content in an area. But, what do you guys, when I say digital signage, what comes to mind for all of you?
Well, I'm going to go nuclear on it. It's everything. Everything we consume via a screen, to me, is digital signage. And to even extend into the classroom experience. Like what we're doing in classrooms is really digital signage. Any data transfer through an actual electrified display of sorts is digital signage in my mind. Now, we can get into the nuance about that.
I agree, Mark, because I think we're seeing, it's how do you, distribute information in the digital format, whether that's on a screen or, a rolling ticker or a web page. It's, someplace where it's not a piece of paper that you printed out and you've used a piece of tape or a staple gun to put it up there. Or, and I'm seeing it used in more broad areas, which I want to really get into later. I have a really good example of how we're using some of our desktops that way later on.
Yes, I think we have to zoom in a little bit. So I went with a really, really broad definition. I think for the sake of this argument, we want to keep zooming in.
Because it's like menu boards, it's information boards, it's the modern bulletin board, it's I wish we would do more with it, but
I do think that we can tighten up a little bit, because something that you said originally, Chris, I think is key, is that public area thing, right? Like it's display for the simultaneous consumption of groups of people, and that changes the way that you design the content. It changes the way that you position the screen. It changes the requirements for the screen. I also think that with digital signage, in contrast to other kinds of displays, you're talking about some degree of continuous operation. That's an element of it for me.
Yeah, and to kind of pull back a little bit more, some of what Mark was talking about with presentations in classrooms, I think that's very much instructor driven, or someone is actually driving that. When I think of digital signage, I think of something that you preload, whether it's a software that lets you interact with it, or it's just content that's going to cycle through. You set it and forget it until it needs to be updated.
So it's the Ronco rotisserie oven of content.
It's data that's just set it and forget it.
But wait, there's more.
So I think that's but don't buy now. Just wait. I think that we're kind of all on the same page here with the idea of as we kind of come to this definition of it's in a public area. It's some sort of display technology. Could be any number of things. Could be tickers, menu boards. Could be actual monitors on the wall, which is probably the simplest one. But could be projection too. I've seen that done. But in public facing areas, or in public in the sense of like if you're working at a wider company, it could be behind a secure area, but it's for general consumption. It's not targeted necessarily at like just this one person or just this one group, because if you're going to do that, that's what a training room is, or a conference room. It's like that's just for us to look at. But I think Larry, you hit on the sentence where it's scheduled or it's automated or it's programmed in, and it kind of rolls through this content. And that may change depending on emergency notification, depending on time of day, depending on the actual use case, but it's kind of programmatically set up. So you kind of would know in theory what's going to be displayed over and over and over again on that. Are we all kind of good with that general description? And of course, we probably can argue any one of those. But
yes, I think zooming in, we're narrowing this down to make a very clean argument.
So I think, and digital signage to me, especially at universities, is interesting. Sometimes you see campus-wide deployments where someone buys into a large service contract, often serviced by a third party, not even by the university itself, or sometimes in partnership with groups of the university. You put up the displays, we'll bring a little box or whatever that might be. More increasingly, we're actually seeing displays now are smart enough to actually run the digital signage clients internally, which is cool because that's one less thing to worry about. But it always raises the question then of who manages these systems. I mean, is it the AV guys? Is it the IT team? Is it the marketing department? Is it each department doing their own thing? How does that work on your campuses as far as when you walk through a new building? Often it's in newer buildings, and architects love to put the little DD for digital display on their initial concept drawings, usually at the wrong size with the wrong size content and all that stuff. But
no, it's
but they never call out who's responsible for operating and maintaining that.
I think we see that. So I want to make sure we acknowledge this. I see often in plans that signage is really as a package as recommended from outside designers in the space. Seldom is it actually asked for by the clients. So they usually I don't know, it was there, so we thought it was part of the academic technology package. So is that something you manage? And my really cynical answer is there's nobody to manage it here. It's always we have a person that I guess can do some PowerPoints and throw it up there, and they'll just let it hang out. But it's very rare that we actually intentionally
our
design
requests are about
signage.
50-50. Of course, it started like Mark's description. Somebody from outside built it into whatever plan it was, and it sounded like a great idea. But we also get a lot from internal, and we always ask the same questions of, great, this is easy for us, but for you,
the stuff is easy.
Who's going to run it? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? I have had countless arguments. Well, they turn into arguments. Usually somebody mad at me because I suggest things like, maybe marketing should run all of these because they already have an avenue to sell advertising. Maybe you should have graphic design people involved.
Is it part of their
usually,
gig now?
just you guys are probably the same way. In our situation, a department buys a bunch of these. In the past, we had software that was just too complicated. Like, it was built for marketing firms. It was built for advertising firms. It has everything you could ever desire and all of the metrics to go with it, and it was just too much. And they would...
usually very, very powerful, but overwhelming.
And
for
they had to
wants
run
to
it on a dedicated PC, which was $800, and they had to do this and they had to do that. It was just extremely expensive and overcomplicated, and they ended up just running PowerPoint off of a shared drive because it was easy, because
White
they handed it
background,
to
black
the
text.
administrative assistant who didn't want anything to do with it at all. And I always ask, and I encourage all these big ideas. I'm like, get rid of these stupid bulletin boards and just have some of these just peppered all over for students. And they just come in the same process. They have to get those dumb signs stamped by somebody to prove that it can be on the bulletin board. So just put it on there and just have them plastered everywhere. And they're like, no, we can't do that. But you let them put a piece of paper up there, or calendars, or right now, one of the really cool things is I love it and hate it, is our desktop support people. We have a new mental health program, newish. It was new before the pandemic, but everybody forgot about it because they weren't there. But what they've done is, what they've done is they've taken it and they put it as the login background on every PC on the campus. And I'm like, that's a fantastic idea. Now, it needs some graphic art eye because there's some conflicts here that are really annoying, but still, fantastic idea. And it's all white with dark lettering.
So Jamie, you mean so like Windows is just automatically pulling every 30 minutes
yes,
that newest
and in
image
this case,
of whatever
it's the
they drop
same
in
image
there.
for like 2 weeks. It's just, Rue Health or Rue Mental Health or something like, call us if you feel bad, right? And I'm like, this is a wonderful idea and a wonderful use of this, but it's an all-white image. And what they didn't think of is that they also put it as the desktop background. And so now you log in and you have this on the projectors and everything else. It's just this bright white destructive. Your retinas are burning out the end and you're like, look, guys and gals, great idea, but let's rethink the implementation. And digital signage, I think, is like that everywhere. Great ideas, wonderful ideas. We can make this work, but a lot of times it's not implemented right. And that's that implementation and planning and use and management. And that's the pain in the ass every single time.
So there's a part of this, like as we get into like the nuance here, right? There's an element of me that goes back to like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with the goal of the signage? And what you described as like, we just need this information to be more readily available. We don't really give a shit like what it looks like. We just need people to know about it.
Clearly.
Yeah. And so so there's utilitarian like signage, which is like road signs and such, and we have the same concept on campuses like signage, right? It's literally just signage. I need to get around.
Do you know if road signs have a border around them? That means they're optional.
I've heard that.
No, that's what I read. The red stop sign with the white border. Roll right through them. That's how it works. You talk to our lawyers later on. But then you have the element of it needs to look good, right? And there's like that art piece of this where it needs to be balanced and needs to be bringing people in. So there's the method that you just described, Jamie, which is like slap it on a computer, make sure everybody's eye is going to see this because we just want people to know. Then there's like put it in a public space and it needs to like look
and I think that's where we're at right now, because ours was kind of developed organically within each department and each group. They all wanted digital signage, and so when we were lucky, they would go through us, and we'd had our pre-existing digital signage solution, or we would find out after the fact that they went and got USB thumb drive monitors and are just putting up PowerPoints or whatever. And so every digital signage on campus looked different, and that was bad aesthetically. And so we came up with a solution that we are proposing. Hey, this is our campus-wide solution that we will support the hardware for. We will provide training for. We will take on a little bit of the cost of ownership and give you templates that you can create or fill in your content on. But it costs so much more than what you were able to do before by just getting a consumer-grade monitor with a USB. And so that selling point is hard, but part of the way we're getting around that is if we give them our solution, we can provide emergency notifications. And that's the only way we've been able to push back against the price so far.
And we see some of that too, with just like any solution we provide. It's like if you're coming to us first because you want something that you can say that we're responsible for. And that's what they're asking us for. Like, can you please do this for me? And by the way, can I call you when it doesn't work? That's the ask. They just don't really come out and ask that way. So, and that's the carrot, right? Where it's like, okay, if you want to call me, it needs to be these things because I don't deal with other things. And so some of that's kind of wrapped up in what you just described, Larry, where it's we, to keep our sanity, have to have a certain level of tool set to be able to support it. And so there is the better solution versus go on down to your local digital provider of displays and TVs and just slap it on the wall.
So one thing I've seen at multiple institutions is people recognize exactly what you described, Larry, that everyone was kind of doing this on their own. They're kind of doing it on the cheap. They recognize that, Mark, to your earlier point, they recognize the utilitarian value of it. Hey, we need to get information out. This allows us to manage a lot of information without having to send 10 students around 5 times a day to swap out little pieces of paper on the bulletin board, which is the analog method, works great. But, how many times you walk past a bulletin board and something catches your eye and you go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's 3 weeks ago. That happens all with a date that says removed by at the bottom and it's still on there. But So a lot of institutions have said, okay, campus wide, we're gonna pick a system like Jamie mentioned. Often they are overbuilt and very powerful, but overly complex to manage this. But we're gonna pick a system. We're gonna get our marketing team involved so they all start to look somewhat the same. We're gonna work with the departments and say, okay, well, we're gonna like campus wide, we'll own 30 minutes an hour, and then because you're paying the lion's share of it, we'll give you 30 minutes an hour or whatever that balance is. But that at least gets some standardization to it. It still comes back to the individual departments rarely ever have staff on board who are capable and really engaged enough to maintain that content. That's often where it falls apart. Now, the advantage of having a campus-wide thing like that is if you've got that department, your history department or your social sciences or your student union or whoever is just not keeping up with it, you can just delete all that content out and just like, well, it's now a institutional-wide display board that still has up-to-date content rolling through it periodically, but doesn't look stagnant and static with stuff that happened last week. So before we get to our last part, I want to come back to anybody else on this, and then I want to mention the idea of booby trapping for this and just bring that up as a concept. But any other last thoughts on digital signage in general before we get into kind of the more academic?
I just want to plus one the idea that I've never really understood the value of digital signage that wasn't networked. I don't really understand how that's much better than a bulletin board. And when you've got it networked, then it opens up the possibility for that signage to be useful along vectors that you may not have even imagined when it was originally commissioned. To Larry's point about emergency notification, but also over the past year, we've seen some schools using their digital signage to help with return to campus issues, like having digital signs communicate new information about COVID policies, or even act as like virtual receptionists to guide people through spaces when you don't want to have a person physically present. We've even seen people installing, temperature sensors on top of the digital signs and having the signs tell people, no, sorry, you have a fever, turn around. Go home.
But you can't do that in a high school because they're all a little warmer than usual.
Yeah. But I think that you're starting to see people take advantage of existing signage like deployment, right? We're like, well, we already have this.
Yeah, what else can we do with it? And if it's not networked, not much.
It probably wasn't the thing that they did it for, right? And so, but now it's like, okay, how can we get value add out of this?
So,
deployment? Mark,
to your point there, let's put a pin in that taking advantage of signs that are already there. Let's put a pin in that for a second. I do want to mention this idea of booby trapping. So, just real quick. So, booby trapping digital signage, and this is something I came up with when Mark and I worked together because we got burned on one where we dutifully, as the AV department, deployed some digital signage, which I'm pretty sure was paid for by the department. But they said, okay, here's your digital signage. Here you go. And I threw on like a blank basic slide or something on there, and it was still there months later. They never touched it. It just was like a static image of their department or the school name or something like that. So the next time we deployed digital signage, and it was at a remote campus, which makes it even funnier, I came with this idea of booby trapping, which is on the default player. I've loaded on some
seasonal.
Generic. Some generic university media, but it was seasonal, and we did this in the fall. So I loaded some fall and Christmas themed, winter themed, things about the university and what's going on. It was marketing material, and I put it all on there. Here's some images and videos, but it was all seasonally themed. That way, the impetus is now on that department or whoever owns it to actually get off their butts and change it, because when people are coming in and it's nice as 78 degrees outside and sunny, why are people snowboarding on that screen over there? Let's get that fixed. And so that actually worked really well because it pushes those departments to actually like the leadership starts asking questions. Hey, who owns all these monitors over here? And why are they showing people having snowball fights and it's May? What is going on with this? Let's get this fixed. And so at least it kind of pushes that forward. So
we need a new sign, so we had to take it all down and go buy all new signs.
We threw it away. That TV only shows winter scenes. You need to buy one in spring.
Yeah,
so
seasonal TV.
Just a quick tip for anybody out there deploying digital signage on your campus. If you're not sure if they're going to do that, feel free to throw some university branded seasonal content on there, and it will force them to actually change their content. So, but let's come back to the idea of taking advantage of displays that are already out there. But before that, Mark's going to push a button again.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
All right, so for the final part of our discussion here, we want to talk about this idea of digital signs or signs that are already out, the displays that are already out there in some sense, but are underutilized, as Rachel mentioned, the ones that there's no network connectivity. Maybe there's a port nearby, but there's no active network connectivity to them. They're just running off a thumb drive, or we see them in newer buildings. They're kind of peppered throughout the hallways outside of classrooms. And so we were talking about this kind of idea of what about, like, for lack of a better term, an academic use of a digital signage display, which we just described as being generally something that's marketing driven or information driven. But what about an academic use? And there are players out there that let you connect wirelessly and things like that. But the idea of maybe like combining a walk-up huddle space or something with a digital signage display, because it's at the same height and it's already set there, and so why not put a couple chairs there and you're done, sort of thing. Or, and Mark, you had mentioned this, the idea of leveraging the displays you have in classrooms already when they're not in use for teaching. Could you put information up on those displays? So what do we think? Is this something that has potential? Or are we starting to see this and think about deploying it?
The
or have
huddle
you guys
space
already
one
done
I've
this?
been doing for a couple of years now. We had some that were out, and they were in lobby-ish kind of areas, and they had a disjointed table. And if you plug in an HDMI to the thing, to the wall, it overtook the digital sign. You did your thing. When you unplugged, it was like 30 seconds. So that way, if somebody else wanted to get in right away, they could. And then it went right back to the digital sign. So we've done that in a couple of places. And like I said earlier, the desktop people are using it on every monitor on campus, which is a wonderful idea. Needs to be implemented better. But I love the idea. I like the idea of multi-using these displays, because some of them cost thousands of dollars. Let's get the most bang for our buck. The last one I'll say is in our theater space, performance, the conservatory areas, their overflow for whatever events going on. So it's all digital signage until the actual event happens. And then the camera broadcasts out, because, in theater, once you leave, you can't come back in until the break. And so everything out there, and then during intermissions and things, it flips back over to buy a Pepsi and, wear your mask or whatever, right? And then as soon as the show starts, is repiped back out to those displays. But those are the multi-uses we use. And it's the most creative way we've used some of them. The rest of them are just, USB.
Yeah. Anybody using them in an actual teaching space or outside of teaching space?
Yeah, there's been a couple.
No.
I have one of those.
I keep thinking about that, but I haven't actually done it.
It's the teaching space. We just put it in for engineering. It's Energy Lab. So they have windmills, they have solar panels, they have all these things they're mounted everywhere. And so most of the time it has the digital signage and the real-time readouts, and then they flip it over and kind of use those same readouts and graphs and go further into it in the classroom that they have that's right there. That's the most educational use we've had for one.
I think it would really have to be the right environment and the right group of instructors to make that work, because otherwise I could see it being a distraction and causing cause.
But surely you'd
certainly have to give them the option to turn that off.
And surely for room booking to help maximize the use of your space. Yes?
Sure. Well, my thinking on that is that, like, on the general use in an academic space is like between classes, not the projector necessarily, but you've got a display on the wall, it's displaying information or something. And Larry, to your point, I come in to start my class, it switches over. Or if I'm not using the displays these days, we're just having a discussion, I have a button that I can kill that. But you'd have to programmatically then give them the option to say, okay, it's been an hour, I'm going to fire it back up. And so it raises some questions. I'm just wondering, if the displays are there, is there an advantage to doing that, or is that just complicating things? Maybe we leave that off, sort of thing.
We played with the splash screen thing, because on a lot of the displays, you can, when they're turning on, you can load an image into that splash. We actually had gone about thinking about, could we put some like tips and tricks and things that are relevant within the classroom experience to that splash screen, and that was
I had a small pilot program doing that with the touch panels, where it linked back to the background linked back to a network site, but it became too distracting because you didn't want them paying attention to what was on there, and now that was a few years ago when it was a little bit more complicated.
I'm thinking larger displays in classrooms, not on touch panels. That's kind of a different thing. Larry, what are you thinking about?
That splash screen, we have talked about that, especially in active learning rooms. So we can do like possible furniture layouts to give the instructor and students different ideas, putting those on the splash screens.
So additional information, but like specific
Yeah.
to that
space.
space.
Yeah.
Here's some teaching ideas or things for this space. That's interesting. I like that.
Going back to Jamie's original extremely broad definition of digital signage as information that is being broadcast out through a screen, and thinking about screens that are on campus all over the place and maybe being underutilized. What about phones? Where I'm seeing digital signage, even like pretty dumb digital signage, making better use of things like QR codes to throw information out to the students' personal devices, so that you can transition between that public viewing experience to a personalized or deeper informational dive.
We've done some QR code like tours in some of our buildings that exist. It's kind of like
In our
alternate
in our
wayfinding.
student union, where they have all of the food place, the bookstore, in that particular one, I pitched the idea once they have digital signs on outside each one of these little areas, and I was like, can we put one of those Bluetooth tagger things on here? So as soon as you walk by, if your phone is set up to receive that Bluetooth notification, it tells you, bang, go eat Chick-fil-A, or bang, go get yourself at Starbucks, or bang. And the school said I hate that on so many personally,
levels.
but I was like, somebody should buy into this. And
I'm going to come to your house with a megaphone and stand outside the window.
went bonkers
I've talked to
about the
students about
idea
that.
Eat Joe's. Eat
that we
at
were
Joe's.
broadcasting those.
I know a lot of students don't like when they have to use their phone for something in a class because they feel like it's their personal, and an instructor should not force them to have to use their personal devices in class. And they're very it gets heated. I've actually talked to a
So
bunch of
Rachel,
students
to your query there, I think the idea, I'd like to combine your idea with what Larry was talking about. So what if you put like in an active learning space, which are a little bit different and offer some different capabilities. You could have a QR code in the corner there on just a login screen or something when it's not in use. You hit that and it tells you about how to best use the advanced technology in this space, or some ideas for teaching in something in a room that is different than just like the sage on the stage. There's a projector and 40 seats sort of thing. So that's a good point. I mean, that's some capability for getting some information out there, or working with your Center for Teaching and Learning, or whoever it is on your campus, about getting some of those tips and tricks for teaching or learning in one of these spaces. And you could do it as just a QR code, bring it up on your device, and then you can read through some material on that. So yeah, why not? I like that. From an academic use, that does kind of address the potential issues of there's just content running on this 80-inch monitor at the front of the room, and I don't want it up there. But if it's just at the the university login screen or whatever, and there's a little QR code in the corner, maybe that's a good compromise.
Need help? Scan this.
Or they need help. Yeah, absolutely. The support help, because a lot of us will do that on our touch panels, hit the button to have somebody come out with some basic responses. But if there's a QR code and it zaps right to a video call or something, then yeah, why not? We could leverage some of that information out there. So it's more useful than just a static display that's either sitting there as a big black rectangle on the wall, or the login screen on the wall, as Jamie described, with a bright white background blowing out everyone's retinas. Or it's always just, I love seeing this. You walk by a classroom, somebody has logged in, and they're sitting on the Windows or Mac desktop with nothing open, and there it is. So, well, I think it's probably as far as we want to go today on digital signage in general. It's a much larger topic. We could probably hash out all our trials and tribulations over the next 2 or 3 hours on that. We will save that for the after party. I would just say my interest, and if you guys have ideas on this, I'm open to it. My interest is in trying to find ways to better leverage these from an academic or instructional method, because the equipment's there, it's already purchased and installed. So always looking for ideas. Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV SuperFriends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.